Hey, Auntie.
Hey everybody, this is We Are Your Aunties. I am Paige Means Hopper, and we are just going to jump right into this tonight. I am so excited to have Auntie Genoa with me, and Auntie Rose is on her way. So we will see her in just a moment. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. It's going to be a little bit different a show tonight because we are going to, hi, whoever that is on Facebook. If you want to go to, I don't know if DY can put it up on the screen, but there's a special, hi there, Desi. There's a special place you can go and click on, and you can give us access to your name here on StreamYard. But at any rate, I am, again, Paige Means Hopper, the author of Healing the Wounds of American Slavery. Auntie Genoa is here with me. We thank DY for being behind the scenes, making us all look and sound good, as he always does. And we're going to jump right into our topic tonight because we're going to go a little bit more deeply and a little bit to another level on these wounds. So far, hey Brooke, so far we have talked about the prison, the school to prison pipeline. We've talked about different reform and education. We've talked about so many other topics. But what I want to do tonight, and I will really give you an opportunity to participate tonight because I really want to know what's on your mind as we go through what we're about to go into. We're going to dive deeply into the wounds of American slavery. Hi, Jacqueline. We're going to dive deeply because here's the thing. If we're going to declare war against something, we need to know what that thing is. We need to really know what that thing is. Not only do we need to know what it is, we need to know the characteristics. We need to know its personality. We need to know its plan. We need to know where it lives. We need to know exactly how to get at that thing. And I will tell you something, like I wrote this book over a period of 20 plus years. It started in 2000, and I am going to expose for the first time tonight that I've done anywhere ever, the Real Talk chapter. If you have read the book, if you not only read the book, if you've listened to the audio, if you've ever heard me speak about how this all got started, then great. This is going to be another level for you. I'm going to read it for you. But if you've never heard me talk about this, it might sound a little weird, but at this point, guess what? I don't care. And you know why I don't care? Because we are hemorrhaging out here. Black people, we are hemorrhaging. But here's the thing I also discovered before I get into the reading. I discovered that every time I went somewhere, I used to always say, before I would begin speaking, by the way, yes, I'm Paige Means Hopper, the author of Healing the Wounds of American Slavery, and I wrote this book unapologetically for Black people, my people. But one morning I woke up and I literally heard the voice of God tell me that, Paige, I want you to stop saying that because yes, you wrote the book, and yes, in your heart and mind, it was unintended, it was unapologetically for your people, but what about my people, right? And so when one of us is hurting, we are all hurting. And so while these wounds were exacerbated by the institution of American slavery, they're universal. They can affect anyone, and they do affect everyone. And so that's where we're going to go tonight. Hey, Auntie Rose, I'm glad you got back in.
Thank you.
And once I get complete with what I'm going to start with, then I'm going to throw this over to the aunties. I just, first of all, want to thank you both from the bottom of my heart for being here, for holding up my arms, for constantly being consistent with your love for me and your purpose and plan around the work, and also just for being true friends. You're not here for any other reason but that you love me, you love the work, you know it's real, and you want to see it go forth. And I just want to thank you both so very much. Same goes for you, DY. Now let's go. So, I wrote a chapter in the book called Real Talk, and Real Talk explains how all of this got started for me. Where it takes you will be very personal to you, but this is where it came from. right? So Real Talk begins on page 25 in the book. And again, I've never read this publicly, but I'm excited to do so for you tonight. It says, please don't tell nobody. They might think I'm crazy. Hell, you might think so too. But I just got to tell somebody. So here goes. Something really, no, really crazy happened to me one day in 2000. Real talk. I was at a deliverance church receiving prayer when suddenly, real talk, somebody else's nightmare showed up in my mind. Let me explain. Bring the music just down a taste. There I was, wide awake, minding my own business, when out of nowhere I was having someone else's memory. And no, I was not dreaming. Real talk. I'm telling you, I was fully awake, conscious, sitting there. My mind was focused and I was keenly aware of everything. I could see, think, feel, hear, and smell. I was listening to Mitch as he was seated next to me, praying for me. And then it happened. It came to me. I smelled it. Field cotton. Not like the freshly laundered scent of a cotton shirt, but field cotton. And here's the crazy part. I have never smelled field cotton in my life. Real talk. I smelled that cotton and felt the beginnings of a searing hot heat peering through the slats of the slave cabin where apparently I was standing. I, in quotes. The sky outside, the cabin, promised a blazing, blistering hot day, but here in the church on Sunday morning, it was still early. Then, in the safety of my chair, inside this deliverance church, wearing a beautiful pair of high heels, I could feel my bare feet resting on soft, dry dirt, pushing between my naked toes. But I knew I was wearing shoes. Yet, in the midst of this memory, I realized that I was also standing on warm dirt cabin floor. I am a girl, about 14 years old, small. I'm wearing a very thin something that resembles a makeshift gown. I see a few straw beds. There are people in them, my family. Still asleep, I'm drawn to the crooked wooden door. I push it just a little, and I see them, rows and rows and rows of cotton, as far as my eyes can see. I'm thinking, I have to pick that cotton, a lot of it. And them stalks are going to be biting my fingers. And that sun is going to be stinging my back like the devil's eyes. And if I don't do it, I'm going to be taken around to the back of the barn and beaten within an inch of my life. Then, in the church, I'm out of my chair. Bone chilling screams filling my ears. Is that me screaming? It must be. My throat is sore. I am the one screaming. And now I'm rolling on the floor of this church in my Sunday best. I feel my heart violently ripping, wrenching, tearing away from my chest cavity. An agonizing, mind-shattering, guttural sound rises up from the pit of my belly. It snakes upward through my torso, slithering vertically through my chest, past my throat, and out of my lips. The sound is tearing through the church like a banshee, threatening to take all of my guts out with it. I should be terrified, at least confused, but I'm not. Because somewhere deep inside, I know. Then I hear it, that still small voice. I listen intently, and I will never forget. Quote, Something happened in this country. It was horrific. Something happened that has been ignored. Something happened that needs immediate attention. The damage must be undone. Something happened that needs to be rectified. You will do what it needs to be done. But first, you need to know more. You will be given more, and you must tell what you know. End quote. From that day to this, the book began to write itself. And it is true. Every last word of it is true. And so I'm telling it to you. I'm telling it to you. Something crazy happened in America. It began 400 years ago. We weren't here yet, but that doesn't matter. We are here now. The descendants of those who experienced it, that bizarre, sick, twisted, and surreal institution, and now trapped in what psychologists call cognizant dissonance, which is an uncomfortable feeling that comes from believing or thinking two different things that cannot both be right. In other words, we feel the reverberation of that time. We know that what happened is real, yet it's very difficult, sometimes even impossible, for us to come to terms with the reality of it. As in, I know this is true, but it just can't be. And to escape the discomfort, especially because it can be so severe in us, many of us choose to remain asleep, to stay out of touch with the reality of the atrocities of slavery. But even the most delusional among us feels it when our mental guard is down, or when fresh trauma reawakens it. No one wants to revisit that horror, and yet we must. I now know we have no choice. The memories I have recounted showed up to support me, to reveal to me the very depths of exactly what happened to my ancestors. The nightmarish recollections poured forth from my guts. I couldn't stop them. The memories carry vital information that I'm compelled both to share and to do something about. As I continue to work with what happened to me that day at church, I face a disconcerting situation that is nearly impossible for me to accept. Denial. You may think I'm talking about denial by descendants of white slave owning Americans, their denial of what their ancestors did to ours. But I'm not. I'm talking about the denial by our own people, Black people, the wounded. And so now you know. If you didn't know before, now you know. This experience that happened to me puzzled me for years. I had no idea what had happened to me, and I wasn't sharing it with everyone then because I was afraid people would think that I was crazy. But now I don't care what they think. I know what happened. I know why it happened. I ended up writing a whole book about it so that not only I could benefit from what was shared with me, the recollections that were shared with me through that experience, but I could share with others. And I began to follow someone else who was doing very similar work, but I had never heard this individual talk about epigenetic experiences until years later, when I was sitting at one of her conferences and she showed us a slide that she had never showed before. I've been following her since 2003. I believe I saw this slide around 2010. And when she showed the slide, she was talking about epigenetics. Epigenetics is a scientific phenomenon. It's a study and actually a literal phenomenon where trauma passes down, trauma and memories passed down from one generation to the next. Someone had done some research on plants. I wasn't interested in that. I just turned the page, kept going. Another person did an experimentation. In fact, it wasn't one person, it was several scientists did an experimentation on mice where they had taken a pregnant female mouse, they had taken cherry blossoms, and they allowed the pregnant female mouse to smell the cherry blossoms while she was being tortured. When this female mouse, and she would go ballistic. And so when this female mouse had her litter, they allowed the litter of mice to smell cherry blossoms, and those mice would go ballistic, having never been literally tortured. Then they thought, well, maybe because the mice were in her while she was impregnated, right? So they waited until she was no longer pregnant and did the same experimentation on this same mouse, but while she was not pregnant. When she became pregnant again, these mice had no exposure to the torture, none. Yet when they were born, when they smelled the cherry blossoms, they would go ballistic. Now we're getting closer to human beings. In fact, it is the story of, not a story, but experimentation on human beings. Rachel Yehuda, Yeduda, Rachel Yehuda, she did an experimentation on Holocaust survivors' descendants who had never been in concentration camps, who had never experienced the Holocaust in any way other than through stories and, verbiage from their family. But yet, when she tested the DNA of the Holocaust survivors themselves against the DNA of the descendants of the Holocaust survivors, their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, she found that there was a cell that stores traumatic information, emotional information, specifically traumatic information, in the Holocaust survivors. The same cell in the descendants was distorted in the same way. And so they too were having nightmares and dreams and memories and all of the things. And so epigenetics is very real. I would not have believed it unless I had experienced it for myself. That is exactly what happened to me that day. It was an epigenetic experience. The other thing I want to get into as I'm laying the foundation for this series is etymology. Etymology is the study of words down to their origin. What I found when I was writing and researching this book, and what I still continue to find as I speak and I do the work, is that the origins of words like fear, rage, jealousy, hatred, these words we think of as negative and dark, all derive from English translations, Dutch translations, German translations, French translations. So that means they're all deriving from Europe. So as I am doing the work, as I'm writing the book, what I'm discovering is that the words themselves, the actions based on those words, the characteristics of those actions, the personalities of those committing those atrocities was even more intensified because the meanings of these words were derived in their culture, which means they knew exactly what they were doing and exactly what they were inflicting on our African ancestors and their descendants, me and you and all of us. So let's just get started then, based on those two definitions, the etymology and the epigenetics. And also just, I want to give you a background on the wounds themselves. 10 main wounds present themselves in the book. 10 main wounds presented themselves to me as I'm continuing to receive prayer, as I'm continuing to do research and dig more deeply into what happened to me that day. The first one is fear. That's the granddaddy. That's the biggest wound of all. Why? Because fear enacts on the other wounds certain commands to inflict on people. For example, we always hear that, fear is the reason why police brutality occurs and why unarmed Black people are murdered in the streets by police officers because they feared for their life. Well, that fear is mirroring between two people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when fear can be transferred between two people, that wound can be transferred between two people. And we'll get into that more as I get into the series, because I really want to get down to the bottom of these wounds. I don't just want to, skate on the surface and talk about, how they enact in everyday situations until we figure out how they're enacting in us, me and you. The next is contained rage, followed by jealousy, self-hatred, damaged belief system, over and underachieving, mental illness, grief and brokenness, death, and masking and pretending. Do any of these sound familiar to you? As we look at our culture today, even as we think about our everyday lives, do any of these sound familiar to you? Because you know what? They sound familiar to me. They are familiar to me. I see them every day. It's just really, really interesting. So I'm going to open up the conversation. We definitely want our audience to participate. Thank you for being here. I see many of you that we know and some of you that we don't know yet. Thank you so much for being here. This is a very important discussion, because let me just say one last thing before we jump in. Hi, Desi. Before we jump in. Okay, maybe I should just have us jump in. I don't want to talk anymore. I'll bring it up as we go along. Don't worry, I won't forget what it is. Okay, so aunties, first of all, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you just for sharing your presence and just who you are as human beings, as believers, as women of wisdom. And so, tell me your thoughts on what it is that you've heard so far.
Oh my God, this is so powerful. Oh, Auntie Genoa, if you want to.
You can go ahead, Auntie Rose.
So powerful. And what I want to say is, I just want to piggyback just a little bit. What Auntie Paige was saying is that you can see it. Not only you can see it, but you can feel it. The fear, the opposite of love is fear. It is. But what I want to say is we've experienced different things with our people with fear. We're you want to say those sayings like crabs in a bucket, but what is it really coming from? Not want to see another one grow. Fear of being in the same boat, or fear of someone leaving the boat that you're in. And all of this negativity that we experience, but never had words, terminology, an explanation for what we're going through. Because people, first thing you want to say is, oh, they just crazy. Here we go again. They're doing the same old thing. They need to get up there, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's everything that we're going through in society, our lives, our grandparents, our families, the struggle, it's all there. It is. It's the fears. It's all of the wounds that we've been going through. It is. It's this. That's why I say it's very, very powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. And you know what I want to say to that? And then Auntie Janelle, I definitely want to hear what you have to say. What I want to say to that is that I named 10 primary wounds. Each of those wounds, with the exception of fear, right? So fear stands alone. It's the granddaddy. I didn't even bother trying to go into the details on that more than I have already. But each of those other wounds have sub wounds as well. And we're going to get into that in this series because it's so important that we know what we're warring against, right? If we're going to overcome this, then we have to know exactly what it is that we're warring against. You may notice that I kind of have a little bit of a raspiness in my voice today, and that's because I went to the fight on Saturday. I went to the Gervonta Davis fight. Gervonta Davis against Ryan Garcia. And I've recently gotten into boxing, and I think a lot of it has to do with understanding the strategy and the intelligence and the strength and just kind of the angles and fighting, what fighting really looks like when you're doing it the right way. So I just wanted to say that, part of what we're looking at too is understanding totally what these wounds are so that we know how to deal with them. So take it away, Auntie Janelle. I've been waiting to hear from you.
Well, good evening, all. My thing was, I read when I read through the book, because I could never understand why every time a person of color tried to get up in a position, why there was so much overreaching anger, why there was so much hatred, why there was so much rage. It's like, who do they think they are? You think you better than us, and all this other stuff. And once I looked at the wounds, not only the ones that's within our own communities, but from the other communities. They're going basically through the same stuff that we're going through. But the thing is, they put themselves on top. And we've been conditioned to accept where we are. Well, I'm not saying that we do, but it's a conditioning. You call the seasoning in the book, sis.
Yes.
Okay. But the thing is, once I was able to really look, it helped me to understand why there's so much emotions and why there's so much rage and anger and hatred. And it's so funny because when it's with among their own communities, and I'm talking about everyone that is not melanated, okay? um they have compassion, they have empathy, they want to help each other and everything. But it's just as soon as chocolate shows up, all of the stuff comes out of nowhere. And once I was reading the book and I was looking at the wounds themselves, I was like, oh.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't think it comes out of nowhere necessarily. I mean, I know you know that. Like, it doesn't come out of nowhere. Like you said, it's the conditioning, it's the programming, it's little, and the seasoning. I call it the seasoning in the book because that's what they called it, as a specific system that they use to program and condition the enslaved. Somebody had the question. Thank God, Michelle. Michelle has a great question. Why don't all of us have these memories? How do we know that you don't?
Yeah.
How do we know that you don't?
You ever have deja vu dreams, Michelle?
Deja vu. It happens to deja vu. But the bottom line is, I think all of us have access to these dreams. I didn't ask. It's not a dream. First,
No.
it's not a dream.
No.
It's a memory.
Mhm.
And it's passed down through DNA. So it could be that your ancestry, right, didn't experience it to the same degree as someone else. It could be, I'm more sensitive spiritually than the next person. It could be, I don't know why it occurred for me. Somebody told me, and see, this gets into a little bit of sketchiness because I don't believe in this. But to a degree, I do believe that, yes, I do believe this, so that we can open certain doors, right, in our spiritual selves without trying. And sometimes people do it on purpose, like through witchcraft or magic. I'm not a witch, and I don't do magic, and I don't even watch magic, because it does open the door for certain things to affect me. And I have to be very vigilant and very alert about what I'm doing, because I'm dealing with people's minds, their hearts, their souls, and their spiritual well-being. So, and Desi said exactly what I was about to say next. So bring up her comment, please, DY, Desi Duncans. We sometimes push those memories down so much that we don't want to see it or feel it is real, Michelle. And others. I'm sure others have that same question. Why didn't I have a memory like that? And one of the things too is, I talked about denial when I just read to you from Real Talk. One of the main wounds marching around within all of us is denial. We want to deny that we were affected or how much we were affected, or, there's just always denial. And cognitive dissonance. I also talked about that. Believing two things are real at the same time, but those two things are opposite and can't be real and right and true at the same time.
You know
So
what? Just to go back and answer that question, you know what? With before reading this book, and I've mentioned this before, um, you don't even know that those are memories. You don't even know that they're memories. You don't even know that the negative DNA has been passed down through you don't even know that. It's like almost waking up out of a matrix. You just wake up, and then after reading this book, I had more compassion for my people because I understand where they are, even though most of us don't know that we are sitting in it. We don't know that we've been passed down horrific of different things, and we don't know why that we go through what we go through. Because go back what you've been through in your life. Go back when you were a child and you saw certain things, how we were treated, and how your grandmother dealt with that, how your father dealt with certain things. It was the same thing all the time. And the struggle, the pain, the hurt, somebody just going off for no reason.
right.
All the diseases that we are having,
Right.
it just didn't pop up. It
Yes,
didn't.
yes. I'm so excited for you, Michelle, to start paying closer attention because it's not anything, it's not an indictment against you or anything else. There are so many of us who are like literally sleepwalking because we just don't get it. And like, for example, somebody said, and I believe this is Ricardo, first he said, this is a perfect example. Like, how many Black people are afraid of water? Why?
Yes.
Why? And it has nothing to do with our hair.
I
Mm-mm.
got it. I was
Yeah, but it has
at
nothing to
the
do with our hair. I mean, sometimes it does, but otherwise, no. Okay, go ahead, Auntie Genoa.
no. I when I was in Phoenix, there was a George Carver museum, and they had a lot of things in there that the Black people donated. It was the first colored high school there, and they had she had like papers with history and everything, and they used to take our babies and toddlers and everything and use them to fish for as bait
Alligator.
Oh yeah.
alligators.
Right.
That was crazy. And I was there one day when this white mom had brought her sons through there to look at it, and they had a cotton sack hanging on the wall in the thing somebody had donated. It was folded in half, and I was standing there when she said, "Hold up." I just got a visual when my grandmother would say, "Wait one cotton picking minute. Let
Wow.
me tell you how long this bag was." This bag was so long, and because I looked at it, it was a grandmother and a daughter that donated it to the museum park. This thing was so long that you could probably use as a runner in a long hallway.
Wow. Yeah, they were long. You had to fill that thing up too. And it would contain up to 200 pounds worth of cotton and more, depending on who was picking and how hard they were packing. Another thing is when I started talking about this, a white woman, a friend of mine, Laura, hopefully one day Laura will come and join us. She said, Paige, you know what? I had a same type of memory. And I know that it wasn't my mind. I mean, I wasn't asleep. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dreaming. But literally, I started having a memory of someone else who had lost their son, their baby son. And I was just wailing as herself, as Laura. She was just wailing and wailing, and she couldn't stop because she had had this memory, and it was of one of her ancestors who had lost a child. And so these things are real. Epigenetics is definitely real. Like I said, I don't know if I would have believed it before it happened to me. And I went looking for what is this? And when my friend who was presenting this conference or this workshop, when she threw up that slide about epigenetics, I literally just hooped in the auditorium. I mean, there must have been about 500 people in there, and I didn't even care because I was so excited and so happy to know and be able to put words to what happened to me that day. And it just made a huge, huge difference. I had a fear of water when I was younger, and it took me a while to get over that. Yeah, I mean, these things do come in spurts. It just depends. And someone else's sister was terrified of water. What about dogs?
Mm. Yeah.
Yes.
Like there were a lot of dogs used on our more recent ancestors, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
50s and 60s, German Shepherds.
Mm-hmm.
They
So
used them too, right? When they
I'm
ran
sorry,
away, they used them to hunt them when they
those
ran
were
away.
hounds. Those are
Yeah.
bloodhounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Bloodhounds. Where do you
Mm.
think they got that name from?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And when George Foreman was fighting Muhammad Ali in Africa, what was it, the Rumble in the Jungle?
Mm-hmm.
And he got off the plane with this German Shepherd dog. There were two things that happened. The first thing is the Africans remembered how the Black Americans I was gonna say crucified, terrorized by these dogs. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
would literally, the police would literally let these dogs go on the people, and they would chew at them and bite them and make them bleed, eat their flesh. And so the Africans were very upset that George Foreman had bought the German Shepherd over there, and they were having like literal reactions, physical reactions to him having done that. So there's just lots of ways that this can play out. One of the other things is like total passivity or over aggression, hypervigilance. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all these things come from not necessarily even conversations or teachings from our ancestors or
Mm-hmm.
our more immediate ancestors, grandmothers, uncles, cousins, brothers, like that, but it comes from the experience that they have had and the generational behavioral patterns that pass down through the DNA that way. So I'm just trying to help us understand more deeply that these wounds are very real,
Mm-hmm.
they're festering, they're very much alive inside of all of us, and in our DNA. Our DNA is information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our DNA is made up of all this information. And so, this one cell that I'm familiar with, the one that came through the studies of Rachel Yehuda, is the one that lets us know that something happened here. Even though we only hear it in the history books, and after a while, we may not be hearing it in the history books anymore. So, please, Black mothers, cousins, aunties, grandmothers, teach your children so that they have the correct history because they're trying to eliminate and erase the fact that
Mm-hmm.
there was American slavery at all. But as we go through this, what we realize is that this history lives in our DNA, whether you are on the enslavers side of this history or whether you are on the enslaved side of this history. It lives in all of us. And the thing to do is to, like Michelle said, I love what you said, Michelle. I'm going to be aware because that's what this book does.
Yes.
This work just begins to wake us up out of this stupor that we've been going around in. Part of it is that people don't want to take the time that it takes to get down to the bottom of what's really going on inside of you,
Mm-hmm.
me, because that's where it begins. We're so busy pointing at the politicians, pointing at the government, pointing at the financiers, pointing at everyone else except for really looking at us. And I am the last person.
Hmm.
I mean, I would never victim shame. By the same token, once you know better, you need to be about doing better.
Yeah.
You're not responsible for having these wounds.
Mm-hmm.
But once you know you have the wounds, don't you want to know what they're doing to you? Don't you want to know what they're doing to your children and their children and your community and the globe when we really look? And how we can stop that from happening. And it begins right here in a conversation very much like this one.
Mm-hmm. You know, there is, I remember we were doing a play, this was some years ago, and one of the actors, she brought her 3-year-old son in, and he was just observing. And like he was 3 years old. And there was a part in the play where you had to say one person was pretty and one person was ugly. They were both Black women. And then, so as they were about to say it, the 3-year-old stood up and pointed to the dark skinned woman. He said, "You're ugly." And he's 3 years old. Where did he get that? Where did he learn that? Did somebody tell him? he specifically pointed to her and said, "You're ugly." So that's another thing that we go through, where we're split between the light skin, dark skin, who's pretty, who's ugly. There are so many wounded women, young women that I see on TikTok. They are crying and because they say that they're ugly. And if you see some of these women, it's like, where did you get that from? That you're ugly. So
Right.
it's there. It's true. I know. I experienced a lot of different things and didn't even realize what was going on until I read this book.
Do you realize what happened with the slave masters' wives and the black enslaved women who were on their plantation? So they convinced, or attempted to convince, and for the most part succeeded in convincing the black women that they were much like gorillas or monkeys or chimpanzees or animals, and that they were ugly. And so their big bottoms, big lips, and big noses, and all of those things were shunned and compared to the thin nose of the white woman and the flat bottom, and all these things. But their men were constantly raping the women. But now that's another area of cognizant dissonance, when you're saying on one hand that these women are animals and they're ugly compared to your pure white, delicate white woman, right? But on the other hand, you're sneaking out of the bed of your pure, delicate white woman to go rape the women in the slave cabins. So your cognizant dissonance is, on one hand, she's an animal. On the other hand, you desire her. So what are you saying about yourself then? Number one, you're desiring an animal. And then the other thing is that, there must have been something desirous.
Yes.
So now that we're waking up and realizing that, hey, wait a minute, I'm not ugly. As a matter of fact, I must be pretty beautiful, because they're out there putting things in their lips to try to make their lips bigger, and things in their butts, and they're trying to look like me, tanning and tanning beds, and they're trying to look like me. And the irony of it is the internalized reverse racism that causes these girls, like you said, on TikTok and all of that, to still receive that internalized message that they aren't beautiful,
Right.
and that we are putting, like, I can't tell you some of the bottoms, the butts, the gluteus maximuses that I see, just these huge watermelon butts, to exaggerate what it is that someone else was trying to imitate, which is just this vicious, sick, cyclic cycle. And so this is part of the wounding.
Yes.
Jealousy is one of the wounds.
Yes.
And the wound of jealousy, one of its characteristics, without getting too far ahead of myself, one of the main characteristics of jealousy is that it leads to death, because it says that what the wound jealousy says to our minds, to our psyche, is that I want what you have, and if I can't have it, neither will you. And that's why people are killing themselves and killing others and destroying one another's lives behind jealousy. And not only destroys physically, it destroys dreams, it destroys, all of the things. Yes, all of the relationships.
Yes.
All of the things. When you know better, you can do better. Absolutely, Darren Duncan. And if you don't do better, then that's on you. You can't complain anymore. Once you know what these wounds are, I've heard Rose say, and I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Rose, so that you can tell the people in your own words. You say it so perfectly. She said that when she started reading the book, she started to understand then, she started to wake up to that oftentimes it's not the person you're talking to in a conversation, in an argument, in any form of discourse, right? Or relating to in any way, but it's really their wounds. And now you can see that. Tell us a little bit about that.
It is, because I've come across, if you really are in tune, you can feel the pain of our people. We can feel it. And so when I'm talking to people and they're trying to explain what's going on, and then they start to get enraged or they start to get upset. And then I understand, before I was like, look, here we go. Attitude, lips tooted, head, eyes slanted. And then, but reading the book, it made me understand, why is this person doing this? Why we're not bad people. It's just it just came down from our DNA. So my compassion grew for my people, because I understand that where we've been, where we've come from, where no other race of people have endured what we have been endured for all our lives. And not only that, and it still happens today. When I see our children, our young men getting gunned down, and people want to say black on black crimes, it's the same thing. It's, why are we killing each other? It's because of the pain, the stress. We don't even know that we're under this stress.
Yeah.
A lot of diabetes and different things. I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to say that. But a lot of those are stress related diseases.
They are.
They are. And we have that stress. And as soon as we fly off the handle, it's coming from our ancestors. It's coming from, that's been passed down, just like you said with the mice. It's been passed down.
Yeah.
So now I have to say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I have to be the bigger person. I have to introduce you to what you don't know. I have to explain to you, or I have to sit back and just let you get it off your chest, because sometimes that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
And because it's not coming from a crazy person. It's not coming from a person that's an animal or don't even know any better, or here we go. It's not that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing too that I've noticed, especially on social media, which drives me absolutely bananas, is how quickly we'll jump on each other and critique and judge and do all of these things. And it's not even about that. It's about showing more love. It's about showing more compassion. It's about really being more patient. Now, I'm not saying be a doormat, right? Because that's a wound too. Being a doormat is a wound too. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you can elevate yourself to another level of thinking and feeling and being with the person. I'm going to tell you this. I have a white friend in his 50s, white guy, good looking guy, drives a nice car. He drives up to a gas pump. As he's driving up to the gas pump, a couple of sisters also drive up to the same gas station and the same pump at the same time, and the rest of the pumps are crowded. Because he has this little sports car, right, very maneuverable, he just kind of agilely whips into the space to get his gas up to the tank. Well, these sisters jump out of their car and they are in his face, and they are telling him how disrespectful he is on no uncertain terms, and in very colorful language, much more colorful than what I'm using now, as you can imagine. I mean, they are going off, and he can't figure out why. Like, I just pulled up to the tank first. Like, that happens all the time, where two people go to a parking space at the same time, or pull up to the gas tank at the same time, or they want to occupy the same space at the same time, and one person gets there before the other. He could not figure it out. So he came to me and he said, Paige, this happened and I can't figure out why were they so mad? And I said, I named a few of the different wounds, but one of them, I mean, that comes off immediately. You don't even have to think about. It's total and complete blatant disrespect.
Yes.
Now, was it really disrespectful? It was ungentlemanly what he did, but was it really disrespectful? And it made that he said that they were so angry. They were so angry. I said, look at it again. Look at it through my eyes. Since you love me, I'm your friend. Look at it through my eyes. Were they really angry? Or were they hurt?
Yes.
And he went, whoa.
Exactly.
I wish I knew where they were right now so
Mhm.
that I could buy their gas. you know,
Right.
like, I'm sorry, I apologize. So it's just like Michelle said earlier, it's just being cognizant. It's being aware. And you definitely have to. And look, I'm past trying to sell the book. Guess what? The book's going to sell itself.
Oh, it will. Not a problem.
And we're working on a play, we're working on a film. I've got a list of products, I've got a list of workshops, courses, one-on-ones, free stuff.
Mhm.
Some stuff you'll have to pay for, but free resources. Like now I've gotten to the point where a lot of people have been asking me to do for years, but hey, I've got to go according to the way the work shows up for me.
Mhm.
Right? And now the work is showing up as tools, as
Mhm.
guides. I have a second book already. The first book is the historical context of what we're talking about tonight. The second book is called The Path. So, how do you get past these things then? How do you get them out, the wounds out? You know, it'll go into all of that. And so, as we proceed, we'll begin to understand much more vividly, much more concretely what it is we're dealing with. And I'm so excited about it because you have no idea how much I wanted to share this for
Mhm.
years. But
Yes.
it's gotten to a point where it's shareable now in that context. So we're going to begin to wrap up, but we just want to make sure that we thank each and every one of you for showing up.
Mhm.
Please come back next week because this has been the foundational conversation of the war on the wound. And at some point, I got to tell you what I'm super excited for. My husband, Michael L. Hopper, Pastor Michael L. Hopper, is going to be joining me on stages, on platforms, and we're going to be working this work together. We're going to be doing this work together. We've done it before. I love working in rooms with him and getting our hands on the people, coming before the people, hearing them one-on-one in real time, what's going on and how we can help them get past it, bringing activities and exercises and music and joy. And, some moments get serious, but we try to keep it light because we know this is such a serious and dense topic.
Mhm.
That's one of the reasons why we're going into this series, is so that we can help you understand wound by wound what it is, what it's doing, how it's
Mhm.
interfacing between two people within communities on the globe, and how
Yes.
to stop it. Somebody was talking to me earlier about prison reform. It's interesting. I had a conversation about it, and also it showed up in The Village, which is our Facebook page or a Facebook room on healing the wounds of American slavery. They were talking about prison reform and how we need prison reform. And we know that because there's so many men and women who are in prison, Black men, brown men, Black women, brown women, women of color, men of color, who are in prison that don't belong there. Either they
Yeah.
don't belong there, or at least for the period of time,
Yeah.
for the magnitude of what it was that they did. It was like, a small crime, and they're spending their whole life in prison. That is
Mhm.
absolutely insane. But what I was saying, or replying to this person, is that we do need prison reform. We need reform in so many areas. But in order for that to happen, hearts and minds have to be reformed,
Yes.
because it's people who create the laws. And the
Mhm.
laws will continue to be unjust. The laws will continue to be imbalanced. The laws will continue to be cruel and unusual and traumatic to people of color until the people who are making the laws change their hearts and minds. And the way for them to do that is just like we're doing, learning to understand these wounds and how they're affecting them. And here's the thing I don't think they get. The karma is real.
Oh.
What goes around comes around.
Or what you do to
I
me,
will
you
say,
do to
reap
yourself.
what you sow. You can say it however you choose to say it,
Mm.
but you're going to get what you deal out, Jack.
That's right.
And so, the chickens are coming home to roost. What can I say? But we can alleviate a lot of the consequential damage, right? If we just take the time to look, just take the time to have these conversations,
Yes.
just take the time to heal the wounds of American slavery. I'm Paige Means Hopper. It's been a wonderful opportunity to speak with you. I want to give each of the aunties, thank you, Jacqueline. We love you. I want to give each of the aunties 30 seconds each only. Please, ladies, because you know what happens at the end, right?
I
30
know.
seconds only to just, put the bow on that you choose to put on this conversation.
So just really quickly, I just want to say the wounds is on not just on people of color, but all people, and certain things that you are privileged to was passed down. And sometimes if you don't know that, just like your friend was saying, what is the problem? We all need to wake up. We all need to learn, and we all need to help each other and teach each other. And get in this book. And I'm not just pushing the book, I'm pushing knowledge.
That's right.
You hear me? It's knowledge. And it's something that we need. That's what I'm pushing.
That's right. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Auntie Genoa. Uh-oh, she's frozen. Okay, you're back.
I don't really have a bow to put on here. I feel like a lot of the stuff that's been addressed, this is stuff that we see, feel, and hear. And I feel like you brushed over a question that Darren had. When you know better, to do better. It wasn't so much that he was making a statement. It was a question. I wish he had added more to it so I could understand exactly what he was really asking when he asked that question. And the thing is, when we're having conversations, we need to look at the nuances so we can all come to a greater understanding of each other, because we all learn from each other. Iron sharpens iron, right?
Right. And I think I did address it, because at the very beginning, because I try not to brush over any comments or any questions. That's just not my style. But I think at the beginning, I said that we need to get to the bottom, to the root of understanding these wounds, because once we know, when we don't know, we're not responsible. We're not responsible for what we don't know. Right. But once we do know, we have the information, then it is our responsibility to do something with that information to make a change. So I think that, I don't know if Darren would agree or not, he can let me know, but once we know better, then we can do better, is I think what he was saying. But of course, he'll have an opportunity to come back and tell us next week, because we're going to go into part 2 and part 3 until we make it through every wound. And so meet us back here next week for part 2 of War on the Wounds. We have been absolutely delighted. You're so welcome, Desi Duncan, Darren Duncan, everyone who said thank you. We appreciate you all stopping by. And of course, here goes Lamont. Once you go black, you won't go back. I can't with you, brother. We'll end with that. Until next time, we will be praying for you. We love you. We appreciate your consistency and your support tonight. And until next time, take care of yourselves and be awake, really awake and aware as to what's going on inside of you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Auntie. Wow.